Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to be exploring the world of cavern diving,
Oh, very cool.
and we're going to be taking excerpts from the IANTD Cavern Diver Student Manual.
The IANTD.
Yeah, that's the International Association of Nitrox and Technical Divers. So,
Okay, yeah.
pretty legit organization.
Yeah, they are. I've heard a lot about them.
Yeah, and so um, we're going to be looking at, the different types of caves, like how they form,
Mm,
the equipment you need to dive them, why safety is so important in these overhead environments.
yeah, that's very important.
Yeah, and some really cool stuff about finning techniques to avoid stirring up silt
Oh,
and ruining the dive.
yeah, you don't want to do that.
Yeah, so let's just get started with the first bit here, and that is like the caves themselves, right? They're
Yeah.
more than just holes in the ground.
Yeah, so like you said, there's different types of caves. There's solution caves, there's lava caves, sea caves,
Wow.
and glacier caves.
Okay.
But for diving, the most important ones are the solution caves.
Solution caves. Okay, so what makes them different from the others?
So these are the ones that are formed by the dissolving of rock over time.
Okay.
So imagine rainwater mixes with carbon dioxide in the air and then forms a weak acid.
Hmm.
And over time, that acid dissolves the rock.
Oh, so it just eats it away.
Yeah.
Wow. So it's a really slow process then.
Yeah, very slow over millions of years.
Ah, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, and it doesn't always form uniformly, right? Like different caves
Yeah.
form differently.
The shape and size of the cave is also influenced by tectonic activity and erosion and collapses.
Oh, so that's how you get like those big open spaces then.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow. And did you know that the Yucatan Peninsula caves were actually dry before the Ice Age?
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. How is that possible?
Well, like the water levels and water tables change over time.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So like there's the phreatic zone, which is always underwater.
Yeah.
And then there's the vadose zone, which is above the water table. And so during the Ice Age, sea levels were much lower. So many of today's underwater caves were
Yeah.
actually dry.
So you're saying like before the Ice Age, I could have walked through those caves?
Pretty much. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
It just goes to show how dynamic our planet is.
Yeah. And within those caves, we find those formations called speleothems.
Oh, yeah.
Stalactites and stalagmites and all the crazy shapes.
The stalactites hang from the ceiling and the stalagmites grow from the ground.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And what's really cool is that those speleothems are like time capsules.
Oh, really?
Yeah, scientists can analyze the layers to understand rainfall patterns, temperature fluctuations, and even volcanic eruptions
Wow.
from centuries ago.
That's incredible.
I know.
It's like a history book of climate change right there
Exactly.
in those formations.
But we can't just waltz into a cave without the right gear, right?
No, definitely not.
Yeah.
Reliable equipment is essential in cavern diving.
Yeah, because you can't just pop to the surface if something goes wrong.
Exactly. There's no popping up to the surface if something goes wrong.
You got to be prepared.
You need to be self-sufficient and prepared for anything.
Yeah. So what are the most important things to keep in mind when choosing your gear?
Well, the IANTD manual says there's a few things to think about.
Okay.
Keep your gear streamlined and clean.
Okay.
No dangling bits that can get caught on things. Keep it simple.
Right.
Avoid anything too complex and make sure everything is easy to reach by feel.
Yeah. So you can find it in the dark.
Exactly. You might be in complete darkness.
Okay. And redundancy is key, right?
Oh, absolutely. Redundancy is essential.
Like backups for everything.
For example, your tanks should have dual outlets like a Y or an H valve
Okay.
to give you a backup air supply.
Okay. So what kind of tank do I need?
You need at least an 80 cubic foot tank.
Okay.
And remember, those dual outlets are important.
Okay. And what about regulators?
You need 2 first stage regulators.
Okay.
One with a long hose and one with a short hose.
So one long, one short. Okay. And how long is the long hose?
Usually 7 to 9 feet long.
Okay.
It gives you and your buddy more flexibility in an emergency.
Okay. That makes sense. So we've got the tanks and regulators covered. What about buoyancy?
Right, so you won't be using a standard BCD in a cavern.
How do you use that?
A backplate and wings system is better.
Okay.
It gives you better trim and lift,
Oh, okay.
which is important for moving efficiently and not disturbing the silt.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll have to talk about finning techniques later. I'm sure that's important for that.
Definitely.
Okay, so what about exposure suits?
That depends on the water temperature.
Okay.
A wetsuit might be okay in warm water,
Mm-hmm.
but you'll probably need a dry suit in colder cavern.
Okay, so I guess like normal diving then. What about the mask?
You want a low-volume mask that fits well and is comfortable.
Okay.
A black skirt can be good to reduce glare,
Mm-hmm.
and always carry a backup mask.
Of course. Where should I store that?
Somewhere easily accessible, of course.
All right. And what about fins? Do we need those big, long, floppy ones?
Nope.
Mm-hmm.
You want short, rigid fins for cavern diving.
Oh, really?
Yeah, something powerful.
Okay, so I guess no fancy underwater ballet moves in a cavern then.
Well, there is a certain grace to it, but it's a different kind of movement.
Okay.
You'll be doing modified flutter kicks, frog kicks, even helicopter turns.
Wait, helicopter turns, what are those?
Imagine you're in a tight space and you need to turn around without disturbing the silt.
Okay, yeah.
That's where the helicopter turn comes in handy.
Wow.
You spin around in place without kicking up silt.
Cool. All right, let's talk lights. This is important, right?
Absolutely. Light is essential in cavern diving.
I bet.
You need at least 3 lights.
3? Why so many?
Because if your primary light fails, you need a backup, and then a backup for your backup.
Okay. I'm convinced. What kind of lights are we talking about?
Your primary light needs to be powerful with a long burn time.
Okay.
Your backup should have disposable batteries, just in case, and then you carry a 3rd light for added safety.
Okay, so I guess like redundancy on the lights too. Okay, 3 lights. Check. What about guidelines? I mean, those are essential in caverns, right?
Absolutely. Guidelines are your lifeline in a cavern.
Yeah, especially if you lose visibility.
It's like a trail of breadcrumbs leading you back to the exit.
Okay, but how do you actually lay a guideline?
You start with a primary tie-off outside the entrance in open water.
Okay.
Then you do a secondary tie-off just inside as a backup.
Right.
As you go, you secure the line with placements, wraps, and lock wraps.
Okay, and what are line traps?
A line trap is a spot where the line can go, but you physically can't.
Oh, okay.
Like a narrow crack or a sharp bend.
Okay, so you don't want to get stuck.
Exactly.
Okay, so I guess guidelines are like breadcrumbs in an underwater fairy tale,
That's a good way to put it.
but the stakes are a lot higher.
Absolutely.
Yeah, guidelines are essential for safety.
Definitely. And speaking of safety, let's move on to something a little more serious.
Okay.
Accident analysis.
Yeah, that's important too. We can learn a lot from the mistakes of others. All right, let's dive into that then. All right, so let's shift gears a little bit here and talk about safety,
Okay.
because that's always on our minds as divers.
Yeah.
And you mentioned accident analysis.
Right.
I'm really curious to hear what we can learn from the experiences of other cavern divers,
Yeah.
what's gone wrong in the past.
Well, the IANTD manual actually highlights the top 3 causes of accidents, in overhead environments, and they're all things we've already touched on.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's the basics that are that important.
So the basics are that important, huh?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So the number 1 cause is a lack of a continuous guideline.
Okay.
Number 2 is poor gas management.
Hmm.
And number 3 is exceeding depth qualifications.
So basically just sticking to those core principles
Yeah,
that
yeah.
we've been talking about, guidelines, gas, and staying within our limits,
Exactly.
that can really make a difference.
It can drastically reduce the risk of an accident.
Okay.
Yeah. It sounds simple, but you'd be surprised how often those basic rules are broken.
Yeah. I guess people panic down there.
Sometimes with tragic consequences.
Yeah, stress can really cloud your judgment,
It can.
especially in a new environment.
Yeah. And it can lead to those mistakes that could have been avoided.
Does the manual give any specific examples?
It does. And one of the most sobering statistics is that a number of accidents involved trained scuba instructors
Wow.
who lacked specific overhead environment training.
You'd think instructors would know better.
You would, but it's a reminder that even experienced divers need specialized training
Right.
for cavern diving.
Right.
Open water experience doesn't automatically translate to overhead environments.
It makes me think of Sheck Exley's blueprint for survival.
Yeah.
He talked about getting proper training,
Mm-hmm.
always running a continuous guideline,
Right.
following the rule of thirds for gas management,
Yeah.
staying within your depth limits, and carrying plenty of lights.
Exley's principles are still relevant today.
Yeah.
They've saved countless lives.
Yeah, for sure.
And they're a great framework for safe cavern diving.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've got our gear. We're running a guideline. We're staying within our limits. What else do we need to think about?
Well, communication is another critical factor.
Yeah, because you can't just shout to your buddy down there.
Exactly. You can't just shout to your buddy, especially if visibility is low.
How do you communicate effectively then?
Well, one of the primary methods is light signals.
Okay.
You learn specific patterns to convey messages like, okay, low on air, or I need to turn the dive.
Yeah.
And of course, never shine your light directly in your buddy's face.
Yeah, that's just good diving practice in general.
It is.
But especially in a cavern where you might be relying on their light.
Yeah, it could be really dangerous.
to see.
Yeah, it can cause disorientation and lead to panic,
Easier.
which is the last thing you want in a cavern.
Right. Are there any other ways to communicate?
Well, there's also touch contact communication,
Okay.
which is used when visibility is 0.
Oh, wow.
You can use squeezes on the guideline to signal stop, or
Okay. Wow. So you could have a whole conversation just using hand squeezes.
you could.
That's amazing. Okay. Now I'm curious about something else that the manual mentioned.
What's that?
Rebreathers.
Ah, yes, rebreathers.
I imagine those are becoming pretty popular for cavern diving.
They are becoming more popular.
Because you get longer dive times, right?
Exactly.
More time to explore.
Rebreathers recycle your exhaled breath.
Okay.
They remove carbon dioxide and add fresh oxygen,
Okay.
allowing you to stay underwater much longer than open-circuit scuba.
Are there any other benefits to using a rebreather?
Yeah, they also produce warmer and more humid air
Oh, wow.
than open-circuit scuba,
Yeah.
which can be nice in those cold caverns.
Yeah.
And because they carefully control the gas mixture you're breathing, they can actually help manage decompression stress.
Oh,
so it
wow.
can make your dives safer.
So rebreathers sound pretty amazing. Longer dives, warmer air, and safer decompression.
They do have their advantages.
Is there a catch?
Well, rebreathers are complex pieces of equipment. Okay.
They require specialized training and meticulous maintenance.
Okay. So it's not something to just jump into lightly.
No, you really need to do your research and get proper training.
Okay. So we've talked about the geology, the gear, the communication even.
Yeah.
But there's one more thing I think we should touch on, the mental game.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I imagine it can be pretty intense being in that confined, dark environment.
You're right. The mental aspect of cavern diving is just as important as the physical skills.
Okay.
The manual actually dedicates a whole section to risk management and the psychology of cavern diving.
Wow.
It emphasizes awareness, preparedness, and controlling those what-if anxieties.
So what are some of the stressors that divers might face in a cavern?
Well, there's a few types.
Okay.
First, there's task loading,
Okay.
which is managing your equipment,
Mm-hmm.
navigating 3D, monitoring your time and air supply.
So all the things you need to do.
Exactly. During the dive.
Then there's environmental stress,
Mm.
which is the darkness, the cold, and the feeling of confinement.
Yeah.
And perhaps the most challenging is perceptual stress.
Perceptual stress. What's that?
That's the stress that comes from our own thoughts and perceptions.
Oh.
The fear, the ego, the expectations we place on ourselves.
Yeah.
Those can be far more dangerous than any external threat.
I bet. So how do we combat these stresses and stay mentally sharp?
Training is paramount.
Okay.
The more you practice, the more confident and comfortable you become.
Right.
And those potentially stressful tasks become routine actions.
Yeah. So practice makes perfect.
Exactly.
What else can we do?
Well, planning is key.
Oh.
Having a solid dive plan can help manage that mental load.
Right. Knowing what you're going to do and where you're going to go.
Exactly. It reduces anxiety and uncertainty.
Okay. And anything else?
Mental rehearsal is another powerful tool.
Okay.
Visualizing the dive beforehand, running through different scenarios in your mind.
So preparation is key.
Yeah. And don't forget about managing your expectations.
Oh,
Safety is always the ultimate goal. Don't let your ego push you beyond your limits.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay to turn the dive if things don't feel right.
Yeah. That's really good advice. This all makes a lot of sense. You know,
Yeah.
cavern diving demands a whole other level of mental awareness
It does.
compared to open water diving.
It really does. And to wrap up this section, I think it's worth sharing a quote from Tom Mount.
Okay.
He says, "We all die. It is the quality of life, not the quantity, that defines having lived.
Wow.
Always remain in life itself and not in the problems that exist in the path.
Mm-hmm.
Survival is making the choice to continue and not quitting regardless of the odds."
That's a really powerful quote.
It is.
It's a reminder to stay present, stay focused, and never give up on yourself.
Exactly. It's about having that resilient mindset, knowing that challenges will come up,
Yeah.
but having the determination to overcome them.
And that's a valuable lesson, not just for cavern diving, but for life in general.
It is.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, you know,
We have.
from the geology of caves to the gear and techniques and even the mental game of cavern diving.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey.
It has. It's been really fascinating.
It has.
But before we wrap up,
Yeah.
I think it'd be good to leave our listeners
Okay.
with a final thought-provoking question. You know, something to really stark their curiosity.
I like that.
Yeah, and maybe inspire them to explore this incredible underwater world even further.
Okay. So what did you have in mind?
Well, thinking back on everything we've discussed, what aspect of cavern diving intrigued you the most?
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah.
What really captured your imagination? Was it the geology,
Yeah.
the gear, the mental challenge, or just the allure of exploring these hidden underwater worlds?
I think for me, it was the mental challenge.
Yeah.
You know, that aspect of it really fascinates me.
Yeah, and maybe even more importantly, what
Yeah.
would you want to learn more about?
Oh.
Are you fascinated by the history of cave exploration?
Yeah.
Or are you curious about the different rebreather technologies that are pushing the boundaries of what's possible?
Yeah, there's so much to learn.
There really is a whole universe of knowledge out there,
It is.
just waiting to be explored.
For sure.
So we encourage you to keep exploring,
Definitely.
keep learning,
Yeah.
and maybe even take the plunge into this incredible world yourself.
With proper training, of course.
Oh, of course, safety first, always.
Absolutely.
And a big thank you to everyone for joining us on this deep dive into the world of cavern diving.
Yes, thank you.
We hope you surfaced with a newfound appreciation for the wonders and challenges of these unique underwater environments.
It's been a pleasure.
It has. And until next time,
Yeah.
keep those curiosity fires burning.
Keep exploring.